Good morning, friends. This is the second session of a modest study of reading the writings of Shoghi Effendi. The intention here of this class is to remind us of some of the very important things, excuse me, that are in the writings of Shoghi Effendi. The course of this material that I'm going to use in these classes parallels the youth classes we used to have in the World Center, because those classes introduce materials in a way that, excuse me, that helps us conceptualize the importance and breadth of vision of the Guardian in his writings. Now, last week we looked at a resume of Baha'i teachings and its purposes, its mission, and so on, based on a statement that the beloved Guardian made to the UN committee that was looking at the situation of the Holy Land, religions in the Holy Land. There are a couple of questions I'll just briefly address here. One was, do we know what the other religions wrote? We don't. This was an invitation to relate the relationship from the UN committee to Shoghi Effendi himself, asking for him if he wished to write something. So then he answers them, and this document becomes a resume. This has been published in the Baha'i Worlds a number of times in the past. It's also been extracted and served as an introduction to the World Order letters for some decades, and then now it's not there anymore. So it's not that it's unknown material, it has been published, you can find it there. I find it particularly useful because we're all faced with the question in our individual teaching and in our various conversations and uplifting conversations, discourses, whatever we're attempting to do. What is the Baha'i faith? What are the Baha'i teachings? What is this Baha'i religion, so to speak? And this is always a challenge to all of us to answer. How do we answer? And here I'd just like to suggest that the Guardian has done this already for us. At least we should absorb the elements that he's set forth in this document, which gives us a kind of firm foundation of how to look forward, how to look out on the rest of the revelation and on our relationship with mankind. And it has a strong spiritual orientation. And those are the documents that you had available for downloading last week. So I hope you've had a chance to look at those. I took us through a breakdown of the summary breakdown of that summary statement from 1947. Now tonight, the other thing is, do we have any answer? We don't have any answer. I think there must have been some exchange, additional exchange, which I'm not familiar with the Guardian, just thanking him for his submission and so on. Certainly this document doesn't lose any of its timeliness. It's because it relates so closely to how Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha viewed the faith. I wanted to emphasize, how can we conceive, I think I mentioned this last week too, how can we conceive the history of the Baha'i faith? How can we organize everything that happened in the first Baha'i century? How can we evaluate one event with another event without the interpretation, the divinely guided interpretation of Shoghi Effendi on the development of the faith and the role of the faith and what's important in terms of one event with another event. And this summary starts us off in that direction. Now, you'll find a resume in the list of materials that are available. You'll find 1934, there's an extract from a letter the Guardian wrote to the Mandate government. And this had to do with explaining what the Baha'i faith is to the representative of the British government that was in the Holy Land. And it's a brief statement. And we're going to go to that now, look at that. I'll read that off for you. And then there's a breakdown of it again. This is a kind of a reiteration of what we did last week, but it's based on another summary document. This one is not so readily available. Okay. I have to share screen with you just a second. All right, now how do we go to the document? We need to go to the document. There we are. I hope you can all see this. This is an extract. Again, it's an extract from a summary statement made in 1934 for the Mandate authorities in the Holy Land. The revelation proclaimed by Baha'u'llah, his followers believe, is divine in origin, all-embracing in scope, broad in its outlook, scientific in its method, humanitarian in its principles, and dynamic in the influence it exerts on the hearts and minds of men. The mission of the founder of their faith, they conceive it to be to proclaim that religious truth is not absolute but relative, that divine revelation is continuous and progressive, that the founders of all past religions, though different in the non-essential aspects of their teachings, abide in the same tabernacle, soar in the same heaven, are seated upon the same throne, utter the same speech, and proclaim the same faith. His cause, they have already demonstrated, stands identified with and revolves around the principle of the organic unity of mankind as representing the consummation of the whole process of human evolution. This final stage in this stupendous evolution, they assert, is not only necessary but inevitable, that it is gradually approaching, and that nothing short of the celestial potency with which a divinely ordained message can claim to be endowed can succeed in establishing it. Now we go to the breakdown of this subsequent message here on the overview breakdown. All right, here we go. Can you see that? I hope you can all see this. It's very interesting because Shoghi Effendi says so much in the senses that you could bypass it, but there are things here that we want to understand as believers. What do we believe about the revelation Baha'u'llah proclaimed? And here Shoghi Effendi is emphasizing that it's divine in origin. Above all, that's essential for us to understand. It's not the product of human imagination, that it's all embracing in scope, broad in its outlook, scientific in its method, humanitarian in its principles, and dynamic in the influence it exerts on the hearts and minds of men. We want to remember this from the letters of Shoghi Effendi. Says, in teaching, it's essential that we attract divine confirmations. Of course, this depends on our faith, our attitude, our trust, our belief. And those divine confirmations flow through us if we have the correct attitude towards Baha'u'llah while we're opening our mouths and teaching the faith. And Shoghi Effendi says that those divine confirmations are the only thing that affect people. That without the divine confirmation, so we can talk all about the faith, different aspects of the faith, but it doesn't leave a lasting effect. It's information, people learn about it, it's shared and so on. But there is a dynamic influence when you're speaking of the revelation. Baha'u'llah promises he's there with you and he's offering support to you. The hosts of the angelic hosts inspire you to say the right things. And you have to trust in that and you have to act, it seems to me, he repeats in different places, with a conception of love for mankind as you're describing this. Now, moving down the mission of the founder of their faith, they conceive it. It's also a very gentle way to say that we don't just proclaim to say this is what truth is. We say this is what we conceive it to be. This is what Baha'is understand about all of this. So it's a gentle step away from pushing it in people's faces, so to speak. We're explaining what we hold sacred, what we believe. And again, he says they conceive it, the mission of Baha'u'llah is to proclaim that religious truth is not absolute, but relative. That divine revelation is continuous and progressive. Now, we've seen that in the summary resume we were looking at last week. This is essential for us to meditate and think about. And we don't always state that. We start talking about the teachings of the faith, our principles of the faith, but this idea, the only thing that's going to, assist, and this is a major support to the oneness of mankind, is explaining these truths. Now, you oftentimes hear people say, well, people are not interested in religion anymore. But many people who presently have withdrawn from their religious beliefs or are holding them in check, hearing this explanation renews their enthusiasm for the subject. Says this is different. This is so broad in concept. This has a immediate unifying effect. It links us with the founders of all past religions, which he states, though they differ different in their non-essential aspects of their teachings, abide in the same tabernacle, soar in the same heaven, are seated upon the same throne, utter the same speech, and proclaim the same faith. This is that divine constancy, the eternal faith, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. Now, he moves on to say that these cause they have already demonstrated, stands identified with and revolves around the principle of the organic unity of mankind as representing the consummation of the whole process of human evolution. We're pushing mankind toward this stage of organic unity. And it's only through the confirmations of the divine spirit that Baha'u'llah is released in the world that mankind will come to this consummation. It isn't a rational process, although the rational process will maybe help you to look at and examine and think about it. This final stage in this stupendous evolution, they assert, is not only necessary, but inevitable. The House of Justice repeated this about the world peace is not an option, it's coming. That it's gradually approaching. It's a progressive development of all this and understanding how mankind, and certainly the present stages of what's going on in the world are part of the cleansing process that Shoghi Effendi talks about. That awakening people to the invisible influence of this revelation that's the source and maintains us. from a Baha'i point of view, all of us are maintained by the spirit flowing from God all the time. That a moment's lapse in that and we wouldn't exist anymore. But the present day materialism has caused people to try to have identified themselves as existing independently, taking their own decisions, following their own ideas. All of these things, of course, are the opposite of what the revelations of past religions, past leaders have given us. So that's the again, repeating what had been said earlier, that nothing short of the celestial potency with which a divinely ordained message can claim to be endowed can succeed in establishing it. This is why we constantly return in prayer to asking the confirmations of God, both in our own services and in their understanding, in mankind's understanding of what's going on in the outside world. Let's see now, we're going back now to the summary based on both these. You see here, he says, in the words of Shoghi Effendi, this is from God Passes By, the foreword to God Passes By, and these two summary statements, one in 34 and one in 47. So I've just on my own initiative, I've combined these together to give us a picture of what the fundamental Baha'i principles are. We've already considered the fundamental Baha'i principle, which was this first, which consists of these first two items on this list. The religious truth is not absolute, but relative. And I invite you to contemplate and think about this, because it's a very important truth that frees us from the bondage of the strange interpretations of past religious leaders and of the exclusive nature that they have tried to and have established in the world between the different religions, showing that they can't be united and so on. Then the fact that it's continuous and progressive and it's not stopping now. Baha'u'llah says that in 1,000 years or more, there'll be another divine revelation. This is a continuous flow. He talks about the Baha'i cycle, which Shoghi Effendi tells us will last 500,000 years, my goodness. So there's no end to this, to the development of this unification that he's proclaimed. The organic unity of mankind gives birth to the divine civilization, and then that goes through infinite stages of development and relationship with our maker and with the universe around us. He talks about the glorification of religion as a bulwark for the protection of all peoples and nations. We want to bear this in mind. We're living in such a materialistic time that it's so much of that gets discounted. The fact that it gets discounted does not make it untrue. And we need to renew our connection with our Creator and our dependence on His promise of confirmation in proclaiming His truths to our fellow citizens, to mankind in general, whether we're doing this in our own individual responsibility to teach the cause, or as part of our collective enterprise, our different activities under the 5-year plan. We should remember that it's divine confirmation that holds us up, that inspires us, and opens our vision to where we are in the cause and where it's going. And then he also declares that the purpose of religion is the promotion of amity and concord. So we're warned against not arguing, in any case, not arguing about religious teachings. We proclaim the faith, we clearly state what it is, depending on the condition of our seekers or who we're talking to. We may be very frank, or as Shoghi Effendi suggests, Baha was sometimes guarded in his remarks and made more general statements about unity and amity, oneness of mankind. To begin, if there's receptivity, if the people say, oh, they want to know more about it, okay, then we go on to teach them. But obviously we don't teach everything all at once. My own experience is that what I've seen in the writings of the Guardian is that we should use the name Baha'i and Baha'u'llah in the conversations that we have. We shouldn't hide this away. We have to do this wisely. But when the words Baha'i and Baha'u'llah enter into the consciousness of listeners and seekers, they act as a seed. They begin motivating development. Sometimes there's a very immediate response, and you have, waiting souls that just practically explode on understanding this, and they may be telling you, why you didn't tell me this before? What have you been hiding this for? This is so important, and so on. Search after truth, we usually see that as one of the first principles that Abdu'l-Baha has talked about when he reviews principles. Now, the principles of the faith, the reason there's repetition here is because in some of these summaries, Shoghi Effendi uses verbs and comparative phrases which are very interesting and important for us to consider. Look here, this independent search after truth unfettered by superstition or tradition, which is the main problem of why people don't see the unity of religious truth. And then again, he says the primary duty of an unfettered search after truth, this is for us as individuals as well, this is for mankind in general. And then an unfettered search after truth, unfettered in all mentions of the principle in these three documents of the Guardian. How do we invite people to that? How do we attract them to it? How do we reason with them in a logical way that doesn't sound fanatic and is not certainly proselytizing, but is sharing the truths that we have become the purveyors of amongst mankind? Then we come to the whole question of the oneness of mankind, the whole center of the cause here. The pillar, the central Baha'i principle around which circle all the other Baha'i principles, the oneness of the entire human race, the pivotal principle and fundamental doctrine of the faith. And I think this is becoming more and more popular with what's going on right now. The different nations observing the kinds of reactions to the present racial turmoil going on. All of this is helping people to think in terms of the wholeness of the human race. We're told that the lesser peace will come as a result of that process, not because of our teaching work, though certainly you don't, though not identified with the Baha'i teachings, I think we could all see that it's the release of the energies that Baha'u'llah has brought in his coming, that the Bab and Baha'u'llah represent, that moves humanity. It's a leaven in the spiritual, all-encompassing reality of existence. And this is going to be the consummation of the process of human evolution. Now, friends, we're talking about the relative and let's see. I just was taking a moment to look at the questions that are coming in. Relativity, look at this. We're talking about the consummation of the whole process of human evolution. Is this the whole process of human evolution in the whole universe? Now we have new star systems. We have Baha'u'llah saying that all these planets have creatures whose number no man can compute, that indeed the number of manifestations appearing, I would venture appearing in the station of Baha'u'llah is countless. You can't even begin to, and yet they're all united in their purpose, but everything is at a different stage of development. So this is religious truth, a relative religious truth, that organic unity on our planet is the consummation of the whole process of human evolution. It's not necessarily applicable to our whole solar system, and certainly not to other galaxies and so on. We see it as we're inculcating the principle of the oneness and wholeness of the entire human race. These are interesting phrasings that we need to absorb. Some of this is very helpful to memorize if you can. Proclaims the necessity and the inevitability of the unification of mankind. Asserts, and this is helpful to keep talking about this too, is that it's gradually approaching. Baha'is believe that this is coming. It's inevitable. We're moving towards it. But that nothing short of the transmuting Spirit of God, working through his chosen mouthpiece in this day, can ultimately succeed in bringing it about. Now, friends, how mysterious it is the way God is present in every human heart, that he's embedded his teachings and his support and his light in the innermost soul of everybody on the planet. And from there, he's pulsing. Now, the rub, of course, is that some have found the source of this inspiration and recognize it, and it grows and develops into new stages of human consciousness. And others are still caught in the materialistic outlook of self-love and self-aggrandizement and acquiring goods from others for our own use and so on. Nothing short of this transmuting Spirit of God working through his chosen mouthpiece in this day can ultimately succeed in bringing this unification about. It's not going to come about because we rationally figure it out. We may rationally figure out that we have a social dependency, that we have a political dependency one on the other in the world, and come to the stage of what Baha'u'llah refers to at times as the lesser peace. But I think that the House of Justice has been guarded in this, and speaking to mankind, we should say that this is the great peace of mankind. And then we have another stage that we can explain gradually, which is the most great peace. And Shoghi Effendi says this will come about after the spiritualization of the lesser peace, or of this first peace, through the spread and through mankind absorbing the influences of Baha'u'llah's dynamic revelation. Finally, nothing short of the celestial potency with which a divinely ordained message can claim to be endowed can succeed in establishing it. But let's not forget that, as Baha'u'llah has said, as Abdu'l-Baha has proclaimed over and over in America, that without the power of the Holy Spirit, without the influence flowing from Baha'u'llah's words, these goals of establishing these principles cannot come about. Now the question of prejudice and superstition, how important this is to reach the common recognition of the oneness and wholeness of mankind. And you've seen the summaries in Abdu'l-Baha's teachings about condemning all manner of prejudice and superstition. And again, he refers in condemnation. This is an interesting word, this condemnation, condemn, this is over and over again. we could say we believe the removal of prejudice and superstitions, but this comes combined with this aspect of condemnation itself. Science and religion, so important, these two arms of our existence here. The harmony which must exist between religion and science, that religion must go hand in hand with science, proclaims religion's essential harmony with science. Sometimes we have to be careful because we have theories, scientific theories, which they haven't been proven, but they've been widely, even universally accepted because mankind doesn't know another way to view the thing. For instance, evolution from monkeys to human beings and things like that. Abdu'l-Baha says very clearly in tablets that the truth of science and the truth of religion is the same. It's the same truth, and that they agree with each other. In reality, they agree with each other. Baha'is have difficulties with some of the truths that people present day maybe believe in the present day. This is relative. You have to give yourself time to understand these things. For instance, I know when I was in high school, they taught us that the only star in the heavens that had planets was this one. And ours was the only one that had any life. Now, since then, we've how many countless numbers of star systems, we've found that all the stars have planets. And we'll eventually be able to confirm this question of creatures on the planets throughout the universe, although they'll all be at different stages because some of these suns are just being born and others are dying and the planets, fair enough. But in the countless eons of eternity, this is something that we've eliminated, but it does suggest, again, the relativity of the truth that science proclaims has to go hand in hand with science. That is, we shouldn't be looking at religion to see what's not scientific. We should also be looking the other way around. What in science is not upheld by the revelation itself. It's a twofold operation we have going on here. Then Shoghi Effendi uses these words, proclaims the essential harmony of religion with science. So, friends, sometimes we in teaching, when we talk about the principles, we shortcut things. We say, we Baha'is believe in universal peace. We believe in men and women are the same. We believe in science and religion are the same. But the simplifying of this list of principles may be not as helpful as looking here to these various introductory phrases Shoghi Effendi uses when talking about these principles. How about men and women are equal? Instead of that, he says, inculcates the principle of equal opportunity, rights, and privileges for both sexes. The equality of men and women, two wings on which the bird of humankind is able to soar. He doesn't say these two wings are the same thing. They're two wings, they're two different things. He unequivocally maintains the principle of equal rights, opportunities, and privileges for men and women. Many of us say, well, I've known the Baha'i principles all my Baha'i life and I've read them and so on. But look carefully at the way these are defined in each case here. Very useful vocabulary and the visionary aspect that this gives us. Advocates compulsory education, insists on compulsory education, and talks about the introduction of compulsory education. This is quite different, you know, before Baha'u'llah appeared, before the Baba and Baha'u'llah appeared. Great
portions of mankind had no access to education. We see that there'll have to be discussions at a world level of what curriculum may consist of and how it might be introduced, whether through individual teachers or through colleges and schools. All of that will evolve and develop as well, as far as my own limited understanding of this. Now, an auxiliary language, the adoption of a universal auxiliary language recommends the adoption of an auxiliary international language, urges either the creation or selection of an auxiliary international language. Now, in the Baha'i writings, friends, we see this principle of Baha'u'llah urges the adoption of language by the world government, by the federated combination of all the elements of mankind. It should come together and decide and pick one language and teach it. Later on, it gives the additional responsibility of the House of Justice to look at this matter and adopt a universal language. But once it's in a position where that will be influence will go all over the world, and that's a later stage in the development of the lesser peace, the great peace coming to the most great peace. Essential is that we have one universal language and one universal script that will complete, if you will, the concept of the oneness of mankind. Talks also about here abolishing extremes of poverty and wealth rather than the economic solution to the world. He limits this each time in these summary lists he's made of the principles. Eliminate the extremes of poverty and wealth, the abolition of the extremes of poverty and wealth. Obviously, this is outside of our hands, but it's certainly something we would be promoting, and the House of Justice urging on the stages of the lesser peace. Now, the other thing is we believe in universal peace, and people said, oh, that's very nice. I'm glad you do. How do you believe in that? But the principle is that the Baha'i revelation, Baha'u'llah, provides the necessary agencies for the establishment and safeguarding of a permanent and universal peace. And here he goes on with the establishment of a permanent and universal peace as the supreme goal of mankind. And he delineates the outlines of those institutions that must establish and perpetuate the general peace of mankind. This is so much easier to swallow than saying we believe in universal peace and we don't explain ourselves. Now, Shoghi Effendi, and also in different places, he's included something that Abdu'l-Baha has talked about, but not necessarily in the list of his principles, which is to exalt work performed in the spirit of service to the rank of worship. Exalts any work performed in the spirit of service to the level of worship. The exaltation of work performed in the spirit of service to the rank of worship. Very interesting principle. When we labor for the well-being of others in the spirit of the cause that permeates our beings and wells up through these gifts and endowments that God has placed in each of us, this then ranks as the worship of God. This is a whole world in itself, the glorification of justice as the ruling principle in human society. Again, you move right away with the idea that the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. It's interesting that the justice in that hidden word is a different word from justice in House of Justice. The word in the House of Justice, it'll add House of Justice, is a justice which is the counterbalance of mercy. The use of the word in the hidden word, the other word that's used from the original language in the hidden word, implies fair-mindedness on the part of the individual, equity in assessing things. Where both of these work together, but this justice has more manifestations to it than we may have originally conceived. Let's see what I've got some comments here I wanted to check just a second. Again, one of the things that's arisen, comments to be made, is that we have different food laws. These are the secondary aspects, not the essential teachings, but the auxiliary, the supportive social teachings that each religion has, and which in some cases they're fixed, and people don't move forward, and so religion has to be renewed. The same essential teachings of religion are the same each time, but when the new teachings come, there's a more universal outpouring, if you will, of their meaning. And then the social teachings are altered completely, so quite interesting. All right, now there's a question of teaching here. Just a second, let me see what this. How to teach Catholics. The question is, how do we apply these teachings to teaching Catholics? Is there any suggestions in that sense? I think that this is, let's see, how do I bring myself back here again? How do I bring myself full screen here? Moving off of this.
Click here, stop share,
All right.
and that will be
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. And now, still doesn't bring me here.
But for them, it's full screen.
Huh?
For them, it's full screen. See,
Here,
for the stream, it's full screen.
it's full screen.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this question of Catholicism, yes, you do have a rejection of people who are fanatic, but they also make very good Baha'is. They're used to obeying religious teachings. So a little patience with them will go a long ways, but still the truths that Baha'u'llah has proclaimed, I think are very attractive, even to Catholics. May give them a relief. The question of the oneness of mankind, the question of recognition of all the religions as the confirmation that in the Baha'i teachings, Catholicism is considered the positive branch of Christianity. But then progressive revelation requires us to add to that knowledge and acceptance of subsequent religious teachings of the prophets that come after Christ. We have something else over here. Yeah, talking about living different places where leading with the question of religion was tough. Well, I think some of you may have answers to that, but the question of creation, the oneness and wholeness of creation is something that can lead to the fact that there must be a universal truth of some sort. And confirmation that that truth has been stultified, and there's a prejudice against the universal realities that we have in the faith. We recognize in the faith that these prejudices have come up and have led people to abandon religion, mostly then because of superstitions or fanaticism or antagonism against other followers of other religions. Again, the view that religious truths are exclusive to each of the religions. There can't be any switching around between them, which is fundamentally the opposite of the Baha'i concept and what Baha'u'llah has brought us. And how about speaking of Baha'u'llah's concepts and suggesting the universal nature of this as a means of reconciling the human race. And we'll get to a few of these passages from Shoghi Effendi where he summarizes our attitude towards past religions. Very, very interesting concepts. We'll organize those and include them in a subsequent class. Let's see. Suggested that some of the followers of different political parties are much more fanatic than religious fanatics, than religious zealots. That's an interesting point of view too. Again, these are the Shoghi Effendi speaks about the false gods that humanity is worshiping, and how the Baha'i faith avoids the exaltation of any nation, class, or race above any other. Also, there's somebody's commented here about divine confirmations. This is essential. And I think that one of the great developments and wonderful emphasis that the House of Justice has put on devotional meetings is that it brings people into contact with the Word of God in a very direct way and an easier way, perhaps, than proclaiming a religious truth. Is prayers that comfort and are attracted, that their hearts are attracted to. So that's something else to bear in mind. So friends, this is the more or less the idea that I wanted to bring to your attention with these summary statements. We'll be looking at something related to Baha'i history, the stages of Baha'i history, the way Shoghi Effendi has drawn the teachings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha together to show us a picture of a vision of the future, of the stages that have to come about in the development of the human race, subsequent development of the human race from now, and how exclusive, how interesting these are in relation to understanding human history. And so I wish you all a wonderful week, and nice to see you all. And I hope you'll read these materials that are available here online. Look at them again, think about them, see what you can absorb and what may be useful to you in developing your own discourse and so on. Somebody's asked about the differences of justice, the two kinds of justice. I think that's been covered. The other question was, let's see, what
Claim to be spiritual.
okay, what can we do with people who claim to be spiritual but not religious? I think we should affirm the truth of a very wise statement, because generally by religion is meant these fanatic inherited concepts of truth that have been distorted by the religious leaders of mankind and are embedded in the minds of the people, and they form prejudicial barriers for them to recognize the purity and greatness of Baha'u'llah's revelation. So I think that, yes, seeking spiritual paths is not necessarily a substitute for true religion, but we need to know the sources of spiritual inspiration. I think that's the whole nature of the Baha'i faith, is it's a message of spirituality. It renews our vision of spirituality, not outside of religion, but transcending the differences that exist at the present time. It's a question of, I think, in a sense also of, sorry, just a second.
Another question.
Somebody's asked about having a study group about the advent of divine justice. Excellent. I think that's been encouraged all around, and that would be very good to do. And now what you want, a topical approach? You could take this the way I'm looking at different paragraphs and break down things in the advent of divine justice. That's certainly the prerequisites for study that are there at the end of, after the introduction of rectitude of conduct and chaste and holy life. Shoghi Effendi outlines that how Baha'is have to study the writings. The House of Justice has mentioned this in their, oftentimes in their communications and letters, and the Ruhi books constitute an incentive to take us to the point where we study the writings on our own. And that's a lifelong task that Shoghi Effendi has assigned us. He said the role of Baha'is is to study and to teach. And we need to do both of these things in order to keep ourselves alive. I think anybody that teaches the faith realizes, you know, I was saying things, I don't know if I got them right or not. So I need to go back to the writings now and see if what I explained is actually in the writing somewhere. And I'll have to do this after today's class myself. So there you are. Okay, friends, that's it for today. Thank you very much.